Iran's secretive Fordo fuel enrichment plant is buried deep underground and considered virtually unreachable by conventional aerial weapons. It's not yet confirmed what exactly the US used to attack the nuclear facility, but experts do say the only known way to destroy it would be to use a massive bunker-busting bomb.
The GBU-57, better known as a bunker buster or the massive ordnance penetrator. And the US is the only country in the world that has them.
The GBU-57, which is the massive ordnance penetrator that's being discussed heavily in terms of American involvement in Iran, can actually penetrate up to 200 feet before detonating its ordnance. It is the only weapon in anyone's arsenal globally that's able to successfully target and potentially even eliminate facilities like Fordo. It was designed originally with the intent of attacking and destroying targets specifically built into mountains.
The Fordo facility southwest of Tehran is at the heart of Iran's nuclear program. It includes hundreds of centrifuges, reportedly buried up to 90 meters underground inside a mountain. And according to the International Atomic Energy Agency, the site has been used by Iran to enrich uranium to 60%, well beyond what's required for civilian purposes.
And let's bring us up with the latest analysis from William Alberque. He's from the Pacific Forum, a foreign policy research institute. He's also a former director of NATO's Arms Control Center. With me in the studio, Shani, Rozanes, our Middle East expert. Let's begin with what damage has been done. We're now getting images through, satellite images, I believe. Do they show up much?
Yes. So I've just seen imagery that shows that the entrances have been sealed with dirt, and the site's the most critical part of the facility. You can see actual holes, and it looks like a boring hole has been created, like by a post digger or something like that. Incredibly precise, and so it looks like these bombs really did do some serious damage.
You say precise. You say bombs. Does it take more than one? And how precise are these huge bombs?
They're very, very precise, I mean, down to the meter. And so really the desire is, you put one in and then you follow it, if you can, down the exact same hole, if not really close to it, so that you can really, really dig in there.
Shani, what about Israel's take here? It launched this campaign surely knowing that it was going to get those bunker-busting bombs from the US.
Well, surely hoping. There was no certainty around that. And actually what we've seen is somewhat of a turnaround by the Americans, because of the first days they were quite clearly distinguishing between themselves and what Israel has done, sort of unilaterally going at it. But as more and more successes were piling up on the Israeli side, the Americans seem to be, definitely Trump, kind of more eager and tempted to bandwagon on that and say, we have now control over the Iranian airspace, and very much. And it seems like also a very big part of Trump deciding to go on with it is understanding that the threats for American airplanes has been mostly eliminated, that Iran is very much weakened, and therefore the risks for any complications is smaller. And that's just for the immediate attack. Of course, the repercussions on the longer strategic stage are still there. But that definitely, no doubt, that the Israeli military successes have helped the Americans decide to bring in the final boot. So they hope, at least, that will be the final hit that will seal the deal in a way.
So what's next? What else could Israel realistically achieve in this campaign?
Well, officially, Israel says this still has lots of targets still on its list. I mean, we still need to see exactly what kind of damage has been done. But I think for Israel, the biggest achievement is the symbolic meaning behind bringing the Americans in, far more than the exact damage that's been done or not been done to the Iranian nuclear sites. The cementing of the U.S.-American ties in such strong way, the signal that it sends out, I think that's definitely something that Israel would be very proud of and very much wanted to achieve, and would also, if we're talking about, again, the ripple effects, where we're heading, what we're talking about strategically. I think Iran has seen in the last 2 years, or almost 2 years, 20 months since October 7th, that all the strategy that it's called the ring of fire that it tried to build around Israel with its proxies, that had failed. But not only that, you've had earlier in this talk conversations about Turkey, about Russia, about other so-called allies of Iran, neither one of them as close as the Americans are to Israel.
So, William, what can we expect from Iran, do you think?
Well, I mean, the choices are really stark for them. They can either try asymmetric escalation, so anything from hitting shipping to terrorist attacks around the world, somehow to try to strike back at the United States in a way that would be attention-grabbing. But of course, the risk of that is they could lose the entire regime. The United States has done this in a very limited way. They have not gone all in terms of attacking different sites around Iran, and they could. So for Iran, really the best option now is negotiation, because I think the nuclear issue at least, can only really be solved through negotiation.
Because we talk about this conflict being a couple decades in the making. Israel being seemingly extremely well prepared and having the US backing, but Iran, you know, the people have been left to look after themselves, haven't they? But Iran does have also time on its side in that it's been waiting for this to happen over the past 2 decades.
Please go ahead.
Well, I think so much of Iran's strategy recently has collapsed. You mentioned the Ring of Fire and how much Hezbollah, Hamas, Syria, all these strategic defeats to their proxy strategy has collapsed. The effectiveness of missile defense to stop Iranian missiles from striking Israeli targets, not 100% effective, but far more effective than a lot of people guessed. So the number of options that Iran has going forward are just really, really limited now.
Okay, what about Israel?
I also want to add to that the fact that exactly, I mean, I think for Iran, the assumption was, if you hear not just Khamenei, but also other Arab leaders like Hezbollah, leader Nasrallah, who was assassinated by Israelis, their assumption is that Israel is a weak, crumbling society, that they either call it a spider web or, you know, Iran has this countdown until Israel kind of collapses. I think they're valuing, you know, not just Israeli sophistication, technology, planning, but also the cohesiveness of the Israeli society. Despite 20 months of a very bitter war in Gaza, with lots of, you know, that is still ongoing, and lots of sacrifices, Israel and the Israeli leadership and the Israeli people now are adamant at pursuing this goal because they feel that this is an immediate existential threat to Israel, and there's a shift in paradigm when it comes to Israel's security perception and working assumption. After October 7th, Israel has very little to zero tolerance to any threats anymore. Definitely not coming from Iran, who has been the one sponsoring and giving trainings to all those proxies who have shown themselves to be the most deadly when it comes to Israeli citizens. And there is great support for that in Israel, I think far more than the Iranians have expected.
And we're over a week into this war. Are both sides slowly depleting their weapons, or can they both hold out for a lot longer than we think?
There are real questions about the depth of Israel's, what we call magazine capacity, the number of defense launchers that they have available. But there are also doubts about how many precisely missiles survived in Iran against Israel's threat, which was really very well timed to destroy storage and access to storage. So on the one hand, there are strict limits in terms of what Israel can do to defend itself in missile terms. On air campaign, there's plenty in the tank left for Israel. So I think they can continue to conduct military operations against Iran for quite some time. It really is a question of what's left in Iran and how well can they use it and coordinate it as they continue to lose military and political leadership.
Yeah, in Israel, there's this meticulous counting of how many rockets are being launched by every because they want to see that they want to hope that what they're seeing is that Iran is weakening, and the feeling is that Israel can outweigh Iran and succeed in that aspect, even though the Israeli economy is completely shut down. Israeli, life is basically stopped. But the idea is that the hope is that it's going to maintain, it will maintain, it can last longer than Iran. This is the hope, at least in Israel. And it seems like there's no doubt that Iran is struggling to respond, at least for Israel, as much as they were expecting. We hear reports that when the cabinet was discussing the possible scenarios over war with Iran, they expected at least 400 to 8,000 civilian casualties in the Israeli big cities. We are now talking about 25. So for Israel, this is a great success, and it gives it a boost to keep on going.
Hundreds on the other side. Of course, will there be more attacks from the US?
I don't think so. I think Trump has done as much as he cares to do so far. You know, he's under tremendous pressure from his own party not to engage in unlimited combat. So it sounds like everything we've heard so far is this was a limited operation to finish off the nuclear facilities, and that's it. Now the pressure returns to the Iranian regime to decide whether or not it negotiates, under what terms it negotiates. Does it have leverage? Has it lost its leverage? So I do think the next step is negotiations, and if those negotiations fail, then the threat is real that the United States would join in more of a decapitation operation with the Israelis.
William, the other thing I'd like to know is the US can try knocking out nuclear facilities, but what about the knowledge?
Right.
I mean, scientists have also been targeted and military generals, but the knowledge?
Yeah, I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds of people involved in the nuclear enterprise in Iran. And so killing a couple of the top scientists looks good on a headline, but it doesn't erase all the knowledge, all of the expertise that Iran has gained in its nuclear program over decades. And really, since the end of its implementation of the JCPOA in February 2021, it has done extraordinary experiments in terms of all the things you would need to do to build a bomb. And yeah, you can't bomb knowledge.
And if we've been talking about Fordo and these other facilities for months and months and months, if not years, surely they would have taken the key materials they need from those sites well before these strikes.
It's an interesting question. So in Isfahan, there is a storage facility where they've been keeping the highest enriched uranium that they have, the 60%. Did they move it? We don't know right now, but we certainly saw vehicles outside of Fordo yesterday. They could have moved it. We also know that just outside of Natanz, they're building a new mountain complex. Is there another complex we don't know about? How many centrifuges have they stored in locations all over Iran? We just don't know. So there could be several hundred kilograms of 60% enriched uranium somewhere in Iran. The place where they would turn that into metal to turn it into a bomb is gone, but can they build another one? Sure. So if they're going to take the long approach and be patient, then they can reconstitute a lot of this. But that's why I think the U.S. has to negotiate an incredibly intrusive agreement with Iran to monitor and to make sure that they don't have any pathways to the bomb. But as we both know, that's such an emotional issue for Iran. It's such a core issue for their identity. I don't know what they're going to be willing to negotiate or what happens next.
Well, we've heard Alberque this morning saying we were in negotiation, we were talking, and then Iran, and then Israel, and then following that, the U.S. has decided to basically kill any talks for any chance for diplomacy. The way the Iranians see it, and the way they insist on communicating it this morning as well, this was a nuclear plan for peace purposes, and any other assumption for them is it accurate and unjustified? Let's not, but of course this is somewhat of a very, this is not a very maybe honest depiction of the Iranian nuclear plan. We do know, for example, for a fact, the IAEA has said just last week on Thursday that they believe, first of all, that Iran was not in compliance with with the terms of the NPT, that it's the treaty that it's part of, and it's also assumed that it has at least 400 kilograms of enriched uranium of the levels of at least 60%, which is what you need to easily break into a bomb within 2 weeks. So there's somewhat of, Alberque's stand there is somewhat of a, I would say, dishonesty. But the way the Iranians see it, what do they have to gain now from negotiations? I mean, they have tried to give what they can. You have to remember also they gave a chance through JCPOA, which we know was not very easy to convince the Supreme Leader Khamenei to join. But then when Trump in his first presidency, he came in and he immediately tossed that out of the window. And that made Iran realize, okay, then maybe we cannot trust the West. They don't have any signals that indicate to them they cannot trust the West. And they also, the way they see it, and Alberque also mentioned it again today in his speech, Israel and the U.S. are both nuclear powers who are trying to dictate to Iran if it has or it doesn't have the right to have nuclear. And they feel like, well, sorry, people, but you don't have the standing to say that. This is duplicity. And this is where we are standing. I mean, we've had that through the negotiations. The gap between the two sides is just so immense that it's hard to see how it's being bridged so easily.
Talking about a picture of what's actually going on as far as Iran's nuclear program goes, the inspectors who do get in and do get to have a look are pretty much restricted to the areas they can go to. Is that right? So we're not getting a clear picture. We don't know where Iran stands. And at the same time, does that mean the US and Israel also are unclear as to exactly what Iran's capabilities are?
So Iran has been under very intense monitoring, not just through the IAEA, but also through spycraft for decades. We've been looking at them so closely to see what's happening. And we do know, as I mentioned, they're building new facilities. There are attempts underway to try to create more bunkers, more tunnels, more places where they can hide. And we know so much about the Fordo facility, for instance, because Iran had to, in order to be compliant with their NPT obligations, with the Comprehensive Safeguards Agreement with the IAEA, they had to give the plans for the facility to the IAEA. The inspectors know what they're looking at, and so we also know what's in there that they've told us about. But we don't know what they have not told us about. And again, they've learned so many lessons from all of this, all of these attacks, from the IAEA inspections, so they may have learned a tremendous amount about how to hide things better next time. So again, that's why I think we're going to need a very intrusive agreement, which will be very hard to negotiate, but...
Just a little point there. Fordo was not, the information of the existence of Fordo was not willingly disclosed by the Iranians.
That's
it was
true.
forced on them because actually some agencies, intelligence agencies, have given this information to actually dissident Iranians outside of Iran who have brought this to the air. So I think when you talk about what we do know, I think we also need to keep in mind what we've seen in the last 9 days is that Israeli intelligence infiltration into Iran, into the effect that, the Mossad claims to have established its own bases on Iranian soil is quite high. And they also want to give Iran the impression that they're completely vulnerable and completely under Israeli eye. You can see that also with Israel's success in eliminating both of Iran's chief military officers, one after another, even though the second one was trying to very much escape that. So it can be that we know much, definitely that Israel knows much more than we think they know. And I think the next 48 hours, we will also see how it determines, the actions of the players in this.
One last word, William, really briefly. If you say Iran would be forced into an intrusive agreement if any negotiations were fruitful, can we say that they're acting seriously, taking these negotiations or have taken these negotiations seriously until now?
It's so hard to say. One of their chief negotiating tactics is delay. And so that's one of the things that got them in trouble here. They had talks with the EU, for instance, and the US just completely lost patience with that because, we'll get back to you in a few weeks or something like that. It's just not acceptable for Trump, for the United States, or for Israel. So it's really hard to say whether or not they're going to take this very seriously. They should.
William, thank you very much for your analysis. Shani, as well, we will be following these developments for you during our rolling news coverage of this conflict. I'm Ben Fajzullin. Thanks for joining us on DW.